Welcome to MSP Voice, the weekly show for MSPs by MSPs. Brought to you by MSP 360, the #1 cross-platform cloud backup. Learn more at msp360.com. This is MSP Voice. Hello and welcome to MSP Voice. This is episode number 66. Today I have a great guest, Eric Rieger with Webit Services out of the Chicago area. We talk about a lot of different stuff, including his management style, which is called open book. There's information in the show notes on that, as well as further information on some other things you can do in terms about the power of purpose. Really great, fun interview, a lot of stuff going on. So definitely stick around for the interview. Before we get to that, though, the housekeeping, mspvoice.com is your source for all things MSP Voice, including the show notes for this episode. We've got information on all the past episodes. And of course, another plug, if you want to be a guest, just click Be the Next Guest, fill out the form, and I will get you scheduled on here. A couple things from our sponsors this week. Again, MSP 360 at IT Nation Connect. That's next week. So I will be there. We have 70 pounds of chocolate. We have t-shirts. We're giving away a drone, Bluetooth speaker. So a lot of really fun, cool stuff that we're doing at IT Nation Connect. Definitely, if you're there, stop by, say hi. I'd love to meet you. Next up, in terms of more resources for MSPs, MSP 360 has actually put together a disaster recovery planning best practices and template. So it's kind of how to respond to unplanned incidents so the business can continue to operate. We've got a few different resources in there. Simply sign up, register. You can download everything. You've got the main steps for the disaster recovery plan, best practices, and of course a template, which includes setting goals, assigning the personnel and procedures required to restore, and all those kinds of things. It's always important to have a plan in the event of a disaster. So again, it's a free resource. Just hit up the URL and give us your name and email, and you can have that yourself. Next up, something interesting is improving cybersecurity of managed service providers. So this is something that NIST, as well as the NCCOE, is actually seeking comments in terms of how to put together a project for improving cybersecurity managed service providers. So that the public comment period is now open. It closes on November 8th. So click this link, and then you can go in and provide feedback in terms of what you think MSPs need to do in terms of cybersecurity. So it'll be interesting to, the public comments part is open now. Once that's done, they'll compile everything. They'll put out some recommendations. So I'll keep an eye on this and let everyone know once that's done. But if you have feedback, definitely get in there and give it to them. And finally, something that actually happened last week, or maybe it was the week before, but in case you didn't know, Thoma Bravo, they're making another acquisition. They're acquiring Sophos. So they've made their bid, $740 per share, which equates to almost $4 billion, $3.9 billion. So that's quite a bit. So if you use Sophos, again, this is private equity taking over, so probably not a lot of change. At the early part, who knows what happens after that in terms of consolidation. When you look at what else Thoma Bravo has in their portfolio, there may be some consolidation, in a year or two down the road. But this information, this is the press release right here from Sophos, link again in the show notes. So with that, that's all the news I have. We'll get you right to this interview. Again, Eric Rieger, really a lot of great information in this interview. So take a listen. Take a look at the show notes for links of things that he mentions, and have a great week. Hello and welcome to MSP Voice. Today I am pleased to be joined by Eric Rieger with Webit Services. Webit, kind of like Ribbit. So you've got the frog as your logo. That's really cool.
Absolutely, yeah. It's kind of an interesting story how we wound up with the frog as a logo. the original name of the company was Titanic Enterprises, and I had several people. Yeah, exactly. When it started to become a thing, people are like, Titanic really doesn't instill confidence in anybody. So, like all good stories, I was at a bar with a friend of mine who's in in advertising, and we were trying to come up with a new name, and finally he's going, okay, tell me again what you do. And back in the day, this was in the 90s, it was web design and IT services, so Webit was born. And then I had another friend who created the logo for us, so it was kind of off and running from there.
Great. Yeah, great story. Yeah, Titanic, like you said, doesn't really instill confidence.
No, confidence is everybody. The first thought is iceberg. No, we don't want to do business with you. Thank you very much. Please move on.
Yeah, so you've been in business for quite a while then.
Yeah, I started the company in 1996, and pretty much like a lot of people, my first entry into business was I was just kind of fed up with where I was. And I just walked in one day, gave 2 weeks notice, and before you knew it, I was president of a company that had no clients and no employees and no real plan.
Everybody starts somewhere.
Not exactly the recommended path for entrepreneurs to start your own business, but it worked out pretty well.
Were you doing IT work previously before you founded Webit?
I kind of fell into IT, so it's not. I've been to 4 different colleges, and so I did. Advertising was the first entry back in the 80s.
Okay.
Then I went for photography, and then I got my degrees actually in materials management, and then I took accounting. So nothing in my formal training has prepared me for the IT world, but it did prepare me somewhat for the business side of things, which I think did give me a little bit of an advantage, because a lot of people are technicians and then they just are trying to figure the business side out. So most of the roles I held previously, the networks back in the day, fairly simple. They didn't work. And I would you didn't have Google back then, so I'd buy these books that were like this thick, and I would just start reading through them and fix things. And they went, "You're the network administrator." And I went, "Okay, I don't know what that means, but I got a job to do here." So they're like, "You're going to fix anything computer related." And I'm like, "Okay, whatever."
Were those books big and red and say Novell on the outside?
The early ones, and then the DOS days, and then the NT 351 and NT 4 and all that fun stuff. Yeah. And then it just kind of, I worked my way up in a software company, and I was director of operations. So basically overseeing all things infrastructure, and we were doing revenue cycle management. We had rooms full of SQL servers, and this was back before big internet pipes and things like that. So it was fairly interesting, but I started doing more of the leadership and less of the do. And then when I got into business for myself, it was more back into the do and balancing both of those roles. So it was a fun little adventure.
Yeah. So you said you started out it was web and IT. I'm assuming now you're mostly probably managed services.
It's funny how things kind of come full circle. So a couple of the people who worked with me at the software company came over here, and now we actually have some software development components to our service.
That's good.
They're ad hoc. They could be standalone. They were driven by client needs, though. We do a lot of work in manufacturing, nonprofit, healthcare, and they've got these systems that tend to not talk to one another very well. So, business intelligence, dashboards, things like that. So a gentleman that used to work with me over at the software company was moonlighting and doing that type of work for us. And then it just got to the point where it made sense for him to come join the team. And now we've got several developers on the staff. And it seems to be a growing line of business for us. There's a need for this business intelligence dashboards and integrations and analytics.
Okay, great. Now, we talked a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things you mentioned in terms of Webit and how you run things is that you're a practitioner of open book management. And, I did some Googling after we talked, so I understood a little bit about it, but why don't you explain what open book management is? It sounds fascinating to me.
Sure. Well, I can attribute finding out about this myself through one of our coaches, Doug Diamond. He's with Business Improvement, and we've been working with Doug for quite a while. And on one of his Friday sessions, he goes, while we're at it, I think you should pick up a copy of the book called The Great Game of Business and read it because it should speak to you. And so I got the book, I read it over the weekend, I called him up on Monday, and I was like blown away. I was so excited. I'm like, Doug, this is the missing piece. We have to do this. And he's like, oh crap, I forgot what happens when I tell you to read books. Like they can actually create a big shift in the organization. Mm-hmm. And so I started investigating it more, and the Great Game of Business is really kind of the roots of open book management in this country. And people should go out and get a copy of the book if they want the whole story. But in essence, what it is you actually teach people the financial side of the business. You teach them how a business runs. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the people out there, if they surveyed their employees and said, like, if they're an owner like me and they went to their team and said, well, how much out of this money that we make, let's say you're $1 million a year business, and say, how much of that do you think I take home in profit? Mm-hmm. And you'll be shocked at what some of the answers are. And people will believe what they think is true. And in a lot of the cases, sometimes employees are thinking 80% comes home with the owner. So that means they think I'm taking $800,000 home out of $1 million in revenue, not realizing the building, your rent, your utilities, your salaries, your tools, mm-hmm. Everything that goes into a business. So when we started doing this, there are a couple things happened. It taught our people how the issues that the clients are facing actually impact either their bottom line if they're a for-profit business, or the mission if they're a nonprofit. Mm-hmm. And a reactive issue that keeps repeating over and over again, how much that truly costs not only us but the client. And so they started asking different questions. We had different conversations going on. It really kind of opened everybody's eyes to what it really takes to not only succeed in business, but just stay in business. Okay. And that's why so many companies, unfortunately don't make it past those first 5 years because, people don't understand where the money goes, what's an investment, what's an expense, how to keep those things in line. Mm-hmm. And so there's different forms of open book too, where, you can be an open book where you share historical financial information, which is, it's good from a transparency standpoint, but people can't really do anything with that. Yeah. We go week to week where we have a huddle and we have line item ownership where there's, like 6 different lines of revenue in our business. I'm really only responsible for one of them. Mm-hmm. The other 5 other people have accountability for it. Now, I'm the owner, so I'm still, at the top accountable for everything. Yeah. But there are people who are handling those things, day in and day out in the business. And by reporting week to week on where we are according to our plan versus just looking in arrears, you have the opportunity to shift and pivot when things are not in alignment with your goals. And it helps people feel more involved and more a part of what's happening in the organization, as opposed to just being told, well, here's what happened, deal with it. So they get a moment by moment, blow by blow play of what's going on.
And this isn't just for your like next level management, is it? This is for everyone.
Everybody. Yep.
Everybody in the entire company.
Everybody's got visibility. So, yep.
Okay. So
the only thing we don't share is the individual salaries.
Well, yeah.
So like if you came to our office, you would see our P&L on a whiteboard in our training room. Okay. And you'd see it week by week, and the salaries and the insurance and the taxes are all rolled up into a line called payroll. Okay. So people can't really figure out what each other are making, for the sanity of everybody here. You don't want to get too deep, but there are companies who actually do share that. And, it's something that we may consider doing down the road.
Okay. And how is that? So, you said you made that switch. Has it helped you to grow your business? Has it, really improved things?
Yeah, we've had some pretty significant growth year over year. We just made the Inc. 5000 list for the first time that we were eligible. We came in at like 2830 something, which I actually got into an argument with him because I was in California visiting one of our clients, and they contacted me about coming to the dinner, and I was like, we didn't make the list, you guys rejected us. And they're like, no. The lady's like, no, I'm looking at the list right now and you're on it. And I'm like, that's not possible. And it's actually a 3-year period they look at, and so we've had 132% growth year over year for the 3-year period.
Oh wow, that's great.
Yeah, which was pretty neat, and it's actually done more than just the growth. It's had a dynamic impact on our culture. Mm-hmm. So it's really helped us clean the house in terms of the people who want to be here and want to have an ownership mentality, because the end goal of this is to become an employee-owned organization. Within the next couple of years, we want to start that process.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you have things like, stock options and shares and those types of things yet, or that's what you're trying to get to?
That's what we're trying to get to as of right now. I'm still 100% the owner, but as we're realigning everything here, everybody understands the targets that we have to get to, because the two things that any ESOP advisor will tell you is that you have to pay your taxes and you have to be profitable.
Yeah.
And usually about 20 people is where they say the size is where you can start thinking about it. And by the end of this year, we should be right around that 20 employee mark.
Okay, great. Yeah, I know that's, when, I've worked for a number of startups, right? And that's always one of those things where, hey, where's my options? Because it makes a huge difference, and it does help incentivize people, because now they have a stake in it, and they can actually see the value changing over time as the business grows. So does their I don't know, stake, but at least on paper, their investment is growing as well. So that's always great.
Well, and there's an accountability it creates too, because you're everybody, everywhere you turn, you're looking at a fellow shareholder in the organization, and nobody wants to let anybody down.
Yeah.
So we know we have to provide the best possible service and outcomes for our clients in order for them to reward us. The profit is the client's voice of rewarding you for a job well done.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that we're doing that, and it's not about the money. It's not about the ownership. That's not the first reason that we exist here. We want to make sure the clients are getting their outcomes that they desire, and when we're doing that on a consistent basis, then they vote with their dollars, which then in turn, because we're driven by that, then everybody here gets a stake in that.
Okay, yeah, that's great. So obviously that you've adopted that management style in terms of open book, but what other things do you think have really contributed to your growth in terms of size? I mean, does it link to advertising? Is it all word of mouth? What are some of the other things that you've seen that have really helped to have that phenomenal growth?
Sure. Well, part of it is organic from the existing client base, because if you do right by a client, then they're going to grow and they're going to consume more services because of that. So that's really part of what's driven it. As far as advertising, we don't do any traditional advertising per se, but we started working earlier this year with a company out of California called Marketing Authority, and they're an organization that was born out of a managed service provider, Sierra Pacific Consulting, and they really kind of, it was the same cold email type approach, and I was very skeptical at first. And they've really taken the time to understand what we're all about and help get our message out there via LinkedIn and some other social platforms. And we're having conversations one person at a time, but to direct key contacts within organizations that we think might be a good fit for us.
Okay.
And so those two things, and then the referrals from our clients have been really what's fueled the growth.
Great. Now, when you think about, all the changes that you've seen, obviously, since you've owned this company, it's been a few years, right?
I have the gray hair to prove it.
What do you think? What's some of the best parts about what you do in terms of the IT, the services business, in terms of helping your customers? What's your favorite part about that?
We were just talking about this the other day, because when you look at it, we get to touch so many lives. When you look at the number of employees that we're managing for our clients, and then you think about the families that they all have, the impact, the reach that we have, the roots of this thing are in the tens of thousands of lives being affected by what we do. And that's no small feat. And it's pretty amazing that we get that privilege to be able to work with these companies, because most of the organizations we work with have their roots like us, where somebody at some point decided they were going to start a business. And, some of them are generational, where this is second and third generation that we're handling. Those have a bunch of unique challenges. But we are blessed to be able to deal with those people on a daily basis and help them navigate the minefield that not only is business, but technology. I mean, if you look back to when I started, I couldn't even envision us being what we are today, because most of the technologies weren't even in play back then.
No, I know what you mean. I remember what I was doing in '96, and it vastly different than what's going on today.
Well, you're a better man than I am, because I really don't remember much of '96.
But that's an interesting perspective, and one that I haven't. I don't think it has come up before, and in terms of talking to MSPs. And a lot of times we think about, you think about as the owner, you're thinking about your employees and taking care of them, the impact you have on them. But, expanding that and pushing it down and understanding that you have a bigger impact in employees of your customers and helping them and then helping them be successful. That's I think it's a great perspective, and it really broadens the vision of what it is that you're doing.
Well, it goes down to our purpose. Part of when we talk back about the open book, there's an annual conference in Dallas in September every year called the Gathering of Games.
Okay.
And a couple of years ago, we got to see a gentleman, Clark Gey from Wayne Fire Sprinklers. They're out of Florida. They're about a $90 million company, at least back then, I think. And he got on stage and gave a 20-minute talk about the power of purpose. So if you Google that, you'll find it was recorded and put on there. And there were three of us from the company at the time that went down there, and we came back, and there was a lot of wet eyes in the audience after he spoke. It was a pretty powerful message, and we were going, well, what is it that gets us out of bed?
Yeah.
And, we started thinking about, our purpose was keeping American business secure and productive. And it took us quite a bit of time to put our energies into figuring out what gets us out of bed every day. And, going back to thinking about how many lives we touch, and the fact that, with security being what it is, I mean, just even in those 2 years, how much security has evolved to be the kind of forefront of IT.
Yeah.
We have a huge responsibility for the economy of the United States, IT providers in general. And if we're not doing our jobs, I mean, this could be a battleground we lose, and that could affect our entire way of life. So we started putting it into that perspective, and that gives you a much bigger purpose when you walk in the door every day here, that you're not just going through the motions and the tools and the RMM alerts and those types of things. You're protecting a business, and it's constantly under attack, and so are we. I mean, they're coming after the MSPs now too. So you want people who are aligned with that purpose, because it does make a big difference.
Okay, and I forget the exact words what you said, what you ended up on your purpose, but what was that again? Protecting America.
Keeping America secure and productive.
Okay, yeah,
American business secure and productive.
Yeah, and I think that's great, and that's one of the things I love about the MSP space is it's really it's enabling small business across the United States and and elsewhere in the world as well, but. When you think about how many small businesses there are so many, and without proper and secure IT support, they're going to fail, and that's not good. So yeah, it's all fun and games to try and sell software to a great big corporation for $1 million contract, but it's another thing to sell to 100 different MSPs, because that has much broader reach in terms of what is happening out there in the world.
Sure.
So, great perspective.
Thank you.
So, obviously from a community perspective, it sounds like the open book community is pretty active, and there's conferences. Do you consider yourself to be part of any other like MSP communities or peer groups?
Yeah, I mean, we've probably been in just about everything that's out there. We started initially in True Methods and continue there today. Gary Pico is one of the people who had a very early influence on me and how we designed our service delivery, and they continue to be a great friend to our organization. That kind of led me to, I've got a couple of friends here in the IT space that we meet once a quarter. We're actually meeting tomorrow for lunch. Our 3 teams actually have a monthly conference call to discuss security in our industry. And, people outside the industry would look and go, why would 3 competitors get on the phone with one another? And in the market that we're in Chicago, it's like, I have so many good friends that I've made through peer associations where, if you're not looking at the big picture in the long term, people would go, why would you even talk to your competitors? And it has made such a difference in avoiding certain pitfalls and mistakes because you learn from one another, and the friendships. I mean, I've made lifelong friends in this business because of associations with other groups who have brought like-minded people together, and the ones who are giving their time to the groups, those are the people that have the same types of thought process as you do. They're not looking to put somebody else out of business, and they know that in our markets there's plenty of room for everybody, and there's plenty of businesses that need it, and we're not for everybody, and neither are they. And we've referred business back to one another, and it's been great to sit there and also to have other business owners to talk to, because there are certain things, even in open book, you can't just sit and have a frank discussion with your employees about, because they just don't have the same perspective of sitting in this chair. So it's been, I mean, that's part of the best parts of this business is the friendships that I've made over the years.
Great. Yeah, and that I've said it before in terms of MSPs, it's so community driven and peer driven, and people talking to other people, whether they're competitors in the local area or not competitors from another area. There's just so much collaboration that goes on within this community. I think it's great.
Yeah, there's a lot of smart people who realize that, there's a plethora of business out there, and nobody can hoard it all for themselves, and it wouldn't make sense to. So there's power in the collaboration, and together we're all stronger and we're better for it. Especially nowadays, we need that collaboration because the industry is under attack.
Definitely. So switching gears for just a little bit, in terms of technology, this is kind of a general question, but what technologies, either today or in the near future, are you most excited about?
I would have to say the promise of artificial intelligence, and I know that scares a lot of people who might know about it on the periphery but don't really have a lot of experience diving into it. I think artificial intelligence is going to have a massive impact on almost every industry and the way we do business. And when you look at what's happening with the workforce, you have the baby boomers, you have 10,000 people a day going into the retirement bucket on average for the next 3 to 5 years. And if you start doing the math with the generations that came after the baby boomers, there's just not enough qualified people coming in to replace those jobs. The people who learn how to automate and have the machines do some of that work that A, nobody wants to do, and B, isn't of value but still needs to be done, I think that's where real opportunity is going to be. So that's what excites me about where we're going as from a technology perspective.
Now, have you introduced AI into any parts of your business yet?
We've dabbled in it with some help desk solutions that aren't quite baked and ready for the market, at least for our size market. And we continue to look at things, but nothing where we've actually ponied up a bunch of money to say this is where we're gonna hitch our wagon to this and see where it goes.
Okay. So in terms of technologies that have you worried, that maybe keep you up at night, or what are your thoughts there?
Well, I mean, outside of the general security stuff, because you're only as good as your last backup and last update, and then the fact that we have people, and anytime you have people in the equation, they're the weak link in the chain, and it's just always going to be that way. The technology that kind of has me worried the most is the IoT stuff, because you have so much sprawl now. I mean, when you have refrigerators with IP addresses and
toasters,
you see all, these are entry points to the network that aren't getting the thought. Like you can spend $1 million securing the perimeter and whatnot, and you plug this thing in, and all of a sudden the firmware or something. And I've seen a lot of stories about stuff that comes over from China that is being used in manufacturing that has hard-coded passwords in the firmware that you can't change, and then they become susceptible to these botnet attacks and God knows what else. Those are the types of things, the places where nobody's really keeping a great eye on, because everybody's focused over here on firewalls and endpoints and EDM and all that stuff. The little IoT stuff, it's like collect all this data for me, and we've gone into manufacturers and seen these IoT readers on the machines connected to public Wi-Fi's. And it's like, okay, so now you're getting all your data, but so is anybody that could sit in the parking lot or anywhere else. And it's like, well, but look, now we have the data. It's like, and so does everybody else. So those are the types of things that concern me, because there's just not a ton of education around it, and it's a real weak potential entry point into systems.
Yeah, and segmentation is definitely key in terms of from a networking perspective. And when you think about it from home use, right? I mean, hardly anyone segments their network at home, right? Everything's on the same Wi-Fi, everything's on the same subnet. It's all just kind of open, and people don't realize how risky that can be.
Well, I joke, and there's truth to it. Is I have for somebody who owns a tech company, I have the dumbest home. Like everybody talks about smart homes. I still get up and you have the remote. I don't have anything I can talk to that answers back to me. I really don't have smart technology in my home, and there's a reason for it. I don't trust a lot of it, and for whatever reason, and I get in my age, I need to get up and exercise anyway. So it kind of forces me to stay a little bit more active, maybe.
No problem with that. All right, are you ready for the rapid fire round?
Sure.
These are easy. They're not meant to be hard, so it's just the first thing that comes to your head. Okay.
Oh, that's dangerous. Okay.
All right. Well, most of them are multiple choice, so it's no problem. All right. First up, Apple or Android?
I've always been an Android guy.
Okay. Mac, Linux, or Windows?
Always been a Windows guy.
Okay. Amazon, Azure, or some other cloud services?
If I had to pick one, I would go with Azure.
Okay. Backups, local backups, cloud, or both?
Well, we go with more disaster recovery. So we want a full continuity piece in there. So there has to be both.
Okay. Virtualization. Should you always virtualize?
There's no absolutes in technology. So I would need a use case.
Great answer. And then finally, think back to the days when you started your business. Which is worse, printer support or vendor cold calls?
Printer support. that was an easy one.
They were probably easier to support back in the day than they are now.
Well, some of the people are still using the ones from back in the day, which is why they're so hard to support now. darn things last too long.
Well, especially if you do a lot of work in manufacturing and shipping and those types of things. Some of those present different challenges than your HP printer that sits on the desk.
Yes, for certain on that one.
Yes. Great. Eric, it has been very informative. I have learned a lot. I know our audience has learned a lot. Any last words before we sign off here?
I think one of the questions we didn't touch on was what advice I would give to somebody starting out today.
Oh, yeah.
And I get asked that question quite a bit, and jokingly I say don't get into the business. But on a serious note, for anybody who's just starting out or only been in the business for a year or two, one of the things I wish people would have really hammered home to me early on is understanding the value of your time and where you put your time and resources in, and where they line up with what goals you have for the organization. I wasted a lot of time early on trying to figure things out and hammering square pegs into round holes. So yeah, just understand the value of your time, and just that goes outside business too. That's life in general.
Yeah, I know some of the peer groups I've talked to, they make a point to say it's, yes, we're going to focus on how you're going to build your business, but we're also going to make sure that you're focusing on your personal life as well. And you don't want that slide because you're focusing too much on the business.
Yeah, if you're not in good health, if you're not in good shape, you can't help anybody else. So sometimes you have to be selfish and take care of yourself. And that's a lesson I learned a little bit the hard way. But we can't all be perfect right out of the gate.
Life's learning experience. So
absolutely.
Eric, great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the time. Looking forward to meeting you in person someday. So I hope we get that opportunity.
Thank you. It was my pleasure, and this was a lot of fun. I appreciate the opportunity to be on here.
All right. Thanks. Have a great week.
Thanks. You too.